6 months left of this year. Much focus has been on the upcoming general elections. However, the past elections have shown a concerning amount of voter apathy, especially among the youth. A report by the Institute of Security Studies from 2016 compiled looking at voting behavior among the youth between the ages of 18 and 24 found that there is very little confidence in the ruling party. So how important is youth participation in voting come election time, and how do we get more young people to vote? The director at Rivonia Circle, Tessa Dooms, joins us now for a conversation on this. Tessa, thank you for making time for us this afternoon. Do you think young people, especially those who are unregistered and not interested to vote, one, don't understand the power of their vote, or two, they are disillusioned and have no faith in this political system?
Hi, Clement. I think it's a healthy combination of both of those things. I think that there's been very little conversation about voting and the power of votes and the ways in which people's votes can translate into substantive change. The disillusionment has affected that because for many young people, particularly born in the democratic era, all of the people who are young at this point were born in the democratic era, those born after the year 2000, have seen their grandparents and their parents vote with very little changes to their own lives in the majority of cases. And so young people are asking, what is the point of my vote? What do I get beyond just the opportunity to put down an X? Because that in itself is superfluous. Part of the answer in that lies in the ways in which we organize our politics in this country, where young people are forced to organize their politics through political parties. And we've seen how political parties become proxies. After the vote, they don't go back to the voter. The voter becomes isolated from the democratic process after the vote. And so the party then becomes a proxy for all decision-making in the 5 years. And young people just do not want to be part of a system where all they are pawns in the system using their vote to elect people and give away their power, as opposed to using their vote to take power.
Yeah. The largest and most influential voting cohort in South Africa are the youth. And you've indicated previously, that if the 14 million unregistered young South Africans voted, they could unseat the ANC. How can the IEC, do you think, and other political parties and other stakeholders get young people to come and vote and understand this political system?
Yeah, I think it goes beyond just the IEC, because the IEC's mandate is really around voter education. And voter education can be very limiting because it's limited to really understanding processes of voting. So how to register, how to vote, what the voting process is. The IEC's mandate does not necessarily extend to talking about the politics behind your vote. And that's the job of political parties in essence, as the first stop. Political parties should be doing a lot more work in terms of engaging voters on how they can use the power of their vote more effectively. But what political parties have focused on is their political parties and ensuring that people in their party blocks show up for them. But they're not really talking to the voter about how they can, as voters, as citizens, as communities, leverage their power and what that vote means. The other part of it is civil society and communities themselves. I think that, especially if you just think about the pure maths of it, for example. So when you talk about the statement that I make about 14 million unregistered people being able to unseat the ANC, there's a myth that says if you don't vote, your vote automatically goes to the ruling party. That's an untrue thing. In fact, if you don't vote, what you're doing is you're making the pool of voters smaller. So whoever does show up, they are the people that count. When you don't show up, you don't count. So in the last national election, only 16 million or so people showed up and actually voted out of a universe of almost 14 million people at the time. That means that the majority of people who could have voted would have outvoted the ANC by far, who got about 10 million votes in that election. But you only count in an election if you show up. And that's why it's important for us to show up. It's important for us to start thinking about the fact that if fewer people vote, it actually benefits political parties rather than if the majority of us vote. That means political parties must work harder to win.
Yeah. Do you think young people are feeling represented, though, by the political parties on offer now? Are there viable alternatives for them?
Well, there are over 600 registered parties in the country, and in the 2021 election, over 300 of those parties actually participated, and that doesn't even include the over 1,000 independent candidates, and we know that in 2024 we'll also have independent candidates contesting. So we're not at a limitation for choice in this democracy. Choice is not the issue. It's the quality of choices. And it is our responsibility to test the quality of all of the choices that are out there. I think that we've limited ourselves to what the media can represent to us. And the media is only a limited pool, right? And the media is going to focus on parties that have already gotten votes historically, the top 3 parties, all of those kinds of things. But we are going to have to break that. And we're going to have to go and engage with parties that are locally formed, parties that are issues-based, parties that are coming to us at very different angles in very different ways. The big parties are not the only parties on offer, and a part of our responsibility as voters is to go and interrogate all the available options as opposed to only being limited to the options that the media gives the most attention to.
Yeah. In 2016, there was a report by the Institute of Security Studies that was authored by Lauren Tracy Temba that looked at the voting behavior of young people between the ages of 18 and 24, and it found that there's a clear trust deficit among these demographics. So for them, the loyalty they have witnessed among their parents and all the groups towards the ANC has brought with it little improvement in their access to basic services, and most importantly, in the quality of the services provided. So it appears from this body of work, this study, young people acknowledged the importance of voting to bring about change. But do they identify voting as the best way to achieve this change?
Well, at this point, no. Young people have chosen many other political tools, like protest, like community organizing, like starting civil society organizations, like resistance politics against the state, taking the state to court even. Yeah, there are young people and groups of young people who have done that. And so the power of the vote has now been a neglected power and space. And I think that's why, particularly at the Rivonia Circle, we've started to talk about a call for new politics. And that means we must not think that the system that we have right now and the kind of democracy we have right now and even the kind of electoral system that we have right now is the one that we must be saddled with into the future. If the way that we are organizing politics and the way that we create political parties isn't working for us, then we must find new ways. I'm an avid supporter of the idea that we shouldn't just defend democracy, we must innovate democracy. We must think about new ways of organizing politically. We must also destigmatize political engagement and political participation. Just because those who've gone before us have used politics for nefarious ends and for their own means and as a way to exclude, doesn't mean that a new brand of politician can't be born out of a new generation of young people. I am ready to be led by a new generation of young people if they're willing to show us that they can and will do politics differently from the people who've gone before them. What is needed right now is a rethinking of our democracy, rethinking of political engagement. What a political party means right now should change in the next 10 years so that young people feel like they have more power through the vote rather than the vote is something where they're giving away their power.
So what else can other stakeholders do? You've said this is not a responsibility that should only left to political parties, right? Getting young people to understand the political system and come out to vote. And it's not only a responsibility that must be left to the IEC when it comes to voter education. So what can we do even in our homes? I know there are people like Mbalintuli who have started a community-based organization that's going to do a lot of work around teaching young people around the power of the vote in this political system. What can other stakeholders do?
Well, I think the number one thing is we need to get as many people in the country registered. That also means we need to get as many people in the country ID documents. What we found is that there's a large number of people in the country, particularly again young people, who do not have ID documents, and that means registration is not even possible. So we must focus on the question of registration and just at a basic level say to people that registration at least gives you the choice to participate. The second thing is that we must start treating voting like it is a group project rather than an individual assignment. See, political parties do that. They treat voting like it's a group project, and they talk about their vote. They talk about who they're going to vote for. They talk about why they're going to vote. They have conversations about how they will mobilize other people to their standpoint. As communities, we don't talk about our vote to each other. As family members, we don't talk about our votes to each other. We don't convince each other. We don't express to each other how we are making our voting choices. And I think we need to do that more. Nobody who's involved in a group project ever says to the members of the group, oh, we all will submit on the day and we won't talk about it between today and the day that we submit our assignment. Yet when it comes to elections, we've personalized and individualized elections, but we forget that your vote impacts on my future. And so we must start having honest, earnest conversations as voters. People who are not politically aligned but are still going to vote have the right and have the responsibility to start talking about and persuading each other, at least on the issues that we should vote for, the quality of people that we should vote for, and the outcomes we should want.
Yeah. Are we talking to the young people in the language they understand and in the platforms where they engage most of the time? Because they are a powerful resource, and political leaders maybe are not doing enough to acknowledge the role that they can play in decision-making processes at, especially national and local level. So how important is it engaging these young people on platforms that they use and identify with? Because I imagine that could go a long way in changing their perceptions about politics and politicians and social transformation.
Yeah, firstly, when we talk about platforms and young people, we narrowly at this point thinking about social media. The truth is the most impressive platforms where young people gather are in their local communities, gathering around sport, gathering around arts, culture, and music, gathering around the issues that they care about. I think one of the things that political parties have gotten wrong over the years is that they think that they can lure young people to voting just by saying the right things. But actually, young people also care about the issues. And I think that's the most important language change that we need. Ask young people what their issues are and ask them who's best suited to represent those issues. Which brings me to a point that is also around what we can do. We must get more young people to raise their hands to lead in politics. And we must stop shaming young people who say that they are willing to be public representatives and telling them that they now have become part of the problem. They're also crooks. We must encourage good young people who have backgrounds, track records, who worked in their communities, who are starting businesses, who are leading in different spheres of society to raise their hands to lead in politics and governance as well. We must encourage it. We must support it. We create entrepreneurship incubators all over the show, but we don't create incubators to train people for public policy, to train people for politics, to train people for political engagement. We must start supporting young people's rise into politics if we really believe that they are the future. Young people will vote for the issues that they care for, but they will also vote for other young people who they trust.
Tessa Dooms, thank you so much for making time for us.